Welcome to Zain Khan Live, where everything is discussed and nothing is censored. We have our old friend back, Matthew Ehret from Canada. He's a researcher and also a public speaker, the founder of Canadian Patriot.org. Welcome to our show, Matthew. It's such a pleasure having you.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Zain.
Um, so I want to talk about the good things that have been happening in the past few years. UFO files being declassified officially. What are your thoughts about that?
Psyop. I think it's a psyop.
How? Explain.
I see them as well, the Pentagon recently failed its sixth audit, and since 2001, I think it was when their first failure of their first audit occurred, resulting in the admission that there was over $2 trillion of just missing budget. um, just missing budget. Can't account for $2 trillion. And I think Catherine Austin Fitts recently did her own assessment using some solid data, which resulted in about a $20 trillion missing gap. There's a lot you can do with that. And the way I see it, I recently wrote an article on MK Ultra, Lawrence Rockefeller, and UFOs, going through the origins of the UFO movement, Area 51, crop circles, what have you, Disclosure Project. And I just traced it to the early days of MK Ultra, the big Psyop operation where the terrain of warfare became focused on the mind of the people, especially with the idea of deconstructing and reconstructing a new personality in both an individual using psychedelics, other forms of electroshock therapy, trauma, reward punishment, all sorts of things. Like, a lot of techniques were developed, and then it was applied to groups and then to nations. And that was the basis upon which the entire restructuring of the economy back in the 70s occurred. The overthrow of Pinochet was utilizing a lot of the techniques discovered or refined in MK Ultra, which was a CIA operation. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were experimented upon. So anyway, I say this because the architects of it, people like, I go through my list in my article. Sir Henry Tizard was the leading figure, who also ran the early 1949 UFO Flying Saucer Working Group as the first government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded agency to investigate flying saucers I think that was 1949 in Britain. There was a similar operation that his colleagues in the United States were doing around that same time. And effectively, I think that what a lot of people are seeing over the years of the Cold War were experimental drones, experimental machinery that was flown and tested under a veil of secrecy. That was the Cold War. You couldn't say anything. And a lot of the flying saucer tech was also developed by the Nazis. So a lot of Nazi aerospace scientists like Victor Schauberger were absorbed by Project Paperclip into the US Air Force. And so there's a lot of evidence that the type of new technologies that were being developed utilizing certain type of reverse combustion engines in flying saucer designs were already being advanced quite a bit, but the Nazis didn't have time to properly put it into service. So it seems like, in my assessment, part of it is that people are looking, including people in the Air Force who are not authorized to have the credentials to be in the know. They see things that are being tested. They don't know what it is. And there is a movement being cultivated. A lot of the early 1950s, 60s flying saucer magazines were being funded by the CIA. A lot of these same figures who were doing MK Ultra were also simultaneously doing the promotion of explaining that these things you're seeing are actually beings from another galaxy. And I think a lot of the people who were
I interviewed Nick Pope, who is a UFOologist. He was part of the British Ministry of Defense. He headed the
Yeah.
UFO chair there. I asked him the same question. I was like, "Can you rule out the fact that these UFOs could be another country's fighter aircraft?" And he gave an answer as if that we cannot rule that out. That is a possibility. And
Could be. I mean, there's a lot we don't know. I mean, are there some is there some evidence that that aircraft that we are not popularly told about do exist and have been developed over decades in black budget warfare operations. I think that that's likely. Is it possible that there's a utilization of CGI, which is, I mean, we all watch Hollywood movies. We know how easy it is to um, make something appear to be true, which is not true, in order to conduct psyop operations. Possibly,
We've
likely
recently seen
so.
like Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mysterio conveying, yeah, exactly, all the holograms. And I mean, there are things like Project Bluebeam, which was documented in the 1990s for the first time that I know of, indicating government operations to utilize advanced holographic technology increasingly to project images in the sky that would then persuade masses of gullible people that either demons or UFOs or whatever the narrators, the real life Mysterios in British intelligence wanted to project as a narrative of what that meaning was, to replace all of the one of the most persuasive things I've seen coming out of the World Economic Forum is this great narrative that we need new great stories, narratives to replace the obsolete narratives of monotheistic religions and obsolete traditions of the old order. And I think part of that would be to fuse some elements of popular religions with UFO narratives to try to, and they could probably do that if people were traumatized enough, if they were more malleable after suffering economically for a certain
Trying to
period of pain.
reinterpret, the Abrahamic faiths, just like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel or something like that.
Yeah, they've been doing that. They've been setting the ground for a long time. And a lot of this is convergent with psychedelic promotions as well. Psilocybins, other forms of mushrooms that they've been working on for many, many years to also make the mind more mushy and more accepting of new narratives. Because with a lot of the mind drugs that Timothy Leary, Aldous Huxley, MK Ultra experimented on, it was discovered that people could be depatterned more effectively through LSD, different variants of ecstasy, other things, which is why I think, again, you'll find that a lot of the same figures, like, for example, Lawrence Rockefeller is not only one of the key founders and controllers of the Disclosure Project, which hired, this fellow, this muscle man biologist, Stephen Greer. He was hired into this Lawrence Rockefeller umbrella organization called Disclosure Project, which got the ball rolling with the Clintons and people like John Podesta of Pizzagate fame, um, who back in the early 90s with Bill Hillary going to the Rockefeller Ranch were the earliest proponents of disclosures of all of the FBI classified information or CIA classified information on UFO phenomena. But this guy is also the main bankroller of the career of Terence McKenna. So Terence McKenna and all of the international work he did compiling research on magic mushrooms was bankrolled by Lawrence Rockefeller, as were many other Tavistock and what's called the Esalen Institute, people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who emerged out of the Esalen New Age open conspiracy groups of California and Berkeley in the 1980s and 90s, bankrolled by the Rockefeller machine. So it's like, do the Rockefellers really care about truth and exposing government corruption and lies about hiding UFOs and other intergalactic aliens that have been communicating with us via mind drugs? Do they really just care about that? Or are they trying to deflect attention away from the actual agency of evil that they themselves are a part of, that are trying to corral us into a new feudal, slave society, which for me, it's the second one.